Thank you to Johnny and Ruth. They have CDs out in the foyer that you can take them home with you if you want. Also, forgot to mention it, and I don't have one with me, but we've got sheets for those of you that are outside the gate. We've got sheets that you can put on your dashboard that when you go through the gate, they'll know where you're going to go. They ask you fewer questions, and you can get through much quicker, we hope. So those are in the back. Wayne will have them for you back there. And hope that if you're outside the gate, you'll take one of those with you. Well, I don't know if you were watching 60 Minutes last week or not. I usually watch to see what their first stories are going to be about. But last week was interesting to me because they had Warren Buffett on there, and he and Bill Gates have formed kind of a club of about 140 billionaires. And the only way you can get in the club is you've got to promise that you will donate from 50 to 90% of your wealth to some philanthropic entity. It doesn't matter, it's not a church or whatever, it doesn't matter what philanthropic entity it is, it just is you will sign a covenant to give between 50 to 90% of your wealth away. Now, I saw the list, and there were only 3 or 4 from this church on there. I was expecting a lot more than that. I was kind of hoping there would be, but just 3 or 4 of you. But it was impressive anyway. And Buffett made kind of a statement. He said, it really is not that difficult to live on $500 million. But in this story, Jesus he was going around preaching and doing the things that he did, and another guy came up to him and said, why don't you tell my brother that he needs to give me my inheritance because he's not being fair with me and I need my inheritance. And Jesus said, I'm not getting mixed up in any kind of family squabble about inheritance. But then he went on to tell a story about having greed and being selfish and all those kind of things. Now, I've been involved in some of those family squabbles. I don't know how I got into it, but somehow I was going to be a mediator for some families about how they were going to divide their inheritance. And we got into an office, and man, the flames started flying and the spears started throwing. And I found myself under the desk trying to protect myself because everybody had their own idea about what their inheritance should be. And sometimes it's down to something as silly as a candelabra or a piece of glass or something. That's mine. My mom said I could have that, and I was her favorite one, and you're not, and all those kind of things. But you just need to have a will. If you don't have a will, get one, because it saved me a lot of problems later on if I'm involved in it with you. But in those days, a lot of people did those kind of things. If there were rabbis or teachers or whatever, many people would come to them and they would say to the rabbi or the teacher, we've got an issue, would you help us settle the issue? And there would be some kind of discussion, and then there would be a resolution arrived to, hopefully, to the betterment of the whole group. Well, in this particular story, and see, some of you are going to start and think, you're starting to think it right now, oh no, he's going to start talking about tithing to the church, he's going to talk about offerings. No, I'm not. I'm not talking about that. Some guy came out today and he said, boy, that was a brave sermon. I said, well, if it was brave, I did it early on, so at least I can get by with it because I'm still in the honeymoon, somebody told me, whatever that means. But it's not about that. I mean, I used to be so stupid that when they'd take the offering, I would say to the visitors that as the plates come by, don't feel obligated to give anything at all. Just let them go. And then it just hit me. Why would I say that? They need to give more than anybody. I should have said, you guys pay double. You haven't been here in a long time, you need to pay double. But that's not what this message is about. So anyway, so there was this farmer, and he was a successful farmer, and he had a wonderful harvest and a crop, and he had looked at his barns, and they were full to overflowing, And he said to whoever would hear, he said, I know what I'm going to do now. I'm going to tear down those barns, and I'm going to build me some even bigger ones, and I'm just going to sit back, and I'm going to drink, and I'm going to eat, and I'm going to have fun, because I don't have anything to worry about anymore. Well, the problem was that as Jesus was telling this story, the response to that guy was, now this is not very neat, but the response to that was, you fool, your soul has been required of you. Now, see, I don't believe that God went around zapping rich people in the Holy Land just because they had a lot of money. I don't believe that at all. I do believe that God told stories where people were greedy and selfish and where they were ego-driven and where they thought that all they needed was themselves and they didn't need God and they didn't think about eternity and they didn't make any plans for the afterlife. I do think that God probably said to them through Jesus Christ, you're not making much sense, you're not doing right, because you're going to be in trouble if you're not careful. And so so when Jesus was telling this story, what he was saying is that when you're saying that I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry, that means that you're a hoarder. That means that you're just going to sit back and you're going to watch the rest of the world suffer while you put your feet up on the couch and just revel in all the good things that you have. And so Jesus knew that this would shake people up. I mean, you and I know that, you know that when preachers get up and they just preach these sermons about tithing, you know it about drives you nuts. I don't think Pastor Davis ever did. I hardly ever do. I know it's God's commandment and all those kind of things. It's not about tithing. What is it? What stewardship is about is using the things that God has given you to make his church and his world a better place. It's not just about having your coffers full at a church or somewhere. I mean, you guys are so faithful, it's not even funny. But you stop and think, when the Red Cross goes to do something in a foreign land, when Convoy of Hope goes to do something, when Salvation Army goes to do something, when these ministries, like what Johnny was talking about today, when they go to do something, how do you think that they're able to do those things? Not because they do it. They do it because there are people like you who believe in them so much that they are willing to give of their income to see these things happen. When in 2008 hit at Focus on the Family, where I was for 20 years, it was a dark day for us, because I'm telling you, it was just like we were sailing along, and in 1 week, the bottom fell out of everything, and we were down here from a $154 million organization to a $100 million organization in about 6 months. Now, you say you can still do a lot with $100 million. Of course you can. But the reality of it is, to do that, we had to lay off over 200 people. Many of them had worked with me for over 20 years. It was heart-wrenching. And why was that necessary? Because people didn't have the wherewithal to help Focus on the Family keep going. So when you think about stewardship and when you think about benevolence, it's not just given to a church. These 50 organizations that Friendship Church support, we do it so that they can continue to do what they do. Some have said to us, without your help, we would not be able to continue. I don't know if that's true or not. I believe them because they said it. But what my point is, that we are integral in the life of many people. But what this guy was doing and what this guy was saying, that he was saying that he had everything. He had friends because he had a lot of money. He had houses. He had lands. He had bigger barns. He had everything that he needed, but what he had failed to do, what he had ignored, was that he had not laid up a treasure, a life insurance treasure in heaven. And God said to him, and this is the bottom line of this whole message, is found in the last verse of that 12th chapter, is that where your treasure is, that's where your heart is going to be. What you are most interested in is what you are going to give the most time to. Now, I remember when I was pastoring in Salem, I got there as a young guy, my hair was real long and all that. I was a hippie from California, and they had a hard time getting used to me there, and we finally convinced them that I was a wonderful person and all that. But the church started growing just leaps and bounds. I mean, it just every Sunday, and then there was standing room only, and then Sunday nights people came early because they couldn't get a seat, and all those kind of things. And all of a sudden, I started feeling that, and all of a sudden, I thought to myself, man, I'm really integral here, and I'm really important here, and I better get Secret Service protection, because if I don't, what would happen to me? And if I left, the church would just close up and all those kind of things. And I was actually, I just get embarrassed when I think about it, but there was those moments and times when I actually was convinced that I was the reason why we were having this huge increase in the numbers of people and missions and all that kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, the Lord just said, okay, I'm gonna humble you. I'm gonna show you what it's like to realize that you're not nearly as cool as you think you are. Now let me give you a little bit of philosophy. There's nothing worse than a guy that don't know he ain't cool. And just remember that. There's nothing worse than a guy that don't know he ain't cool, because he walks around thinking he's all cool, and everybody behind him is thinking, man, where'd that guy get off the boat? Where'd he's coming from? Well, if you look at this, the man and his problem, he never saw beyond himself. See, that's important. If you look at that passage there, he used I and me and my and mine and all these kind of things. He was just using all these personal pronouns on and on and on about what a wonderful person he was, and he never thought about giving it away. His countenance was so anti-charity. There was no denying that he had everything and everything, but there was something that he lacked, and that was an attitude of gratitude that simply said, I'm not just going to sit here with my barns full when there is so much need out there. See, I'm not talking about tithing. I'm not talking about giving to the church. I'm talking about using what God has given you to not only to glorify his name, but to bless the world in which you and I live. The other thing that happened was this, that he never saw beyond this world. That's maybe as important as anything. And that's what Jesus was talking about there. He never saw beyond this world. Everything was wrapped up in what I've got and what I'm doing and all these kind of things. And I remember, was it J. Paul Getty or so? I forget all the names of these guys. But when somebody said to J. Paul Getty, or I think it was J. Paul Getty, how much is enough? And J. Paul Getty said, just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. In other words, once you get on that rotating spiral of amassing whatever it is, anything, whether it's popularity or it's money or it's prestige or whatever it is, or marbles or rubber bands or whatever, once you get on that roll where you're obsessed with all of these kind of things, what you do is you forget about the reality that this world is not our home. We're just a passing through. And that when Jesus said, he said, I ask you to invest not just in that which will decay and which will go away, but he said, why don't you put your riches in heaven and the treasures of God, where they'll neither decay, they won't be stolen, they're not going to go away, and they will bear interest with you for an eternity and eternity and eternity. And so when I was talking about the funeral a while ago, it's a symbolic thing to me of our society, because nobody, just because you're wealthy or popular nobody's just going to be zapped to death because you've got riches and wealth. But what it is symbolic of it is, and I got to get you this now. The world is going on a rampage of of who is the biggest and the brightest and the wealthiest and the most gifted, and now we're in the award season of who's going to get the awards and who's going to be famous because they won the Academy Award or the Screen Actors Award or all these kind of things, and they're not giving any attention to the world beyond. And that's exactly what the Lord was talking about. He said, I don't care how rich you are. I don't care how famous you are. I don't care what you've got. All I'm just saying to you is there is a world beyond this world, and you need to lay up treasures there, because if you don't, it'll cost you. So, in the closing, I just want to share this really quick. There are 3 common mistakes we need not make. Now hear me at this part. Number 1, he thought the purpose of life consisted in the abundance of material possessions. Now, you who watch the stock market, you are less abundant than you thought you were, by the way. But the other day when everybody was standing in line so they could buy a ticket for the $1 billion lottery, a lot of those people probably took lunch money from their kids or milk money from their family or whatever. But I read a statistic the other day that said of the lottery winners, 70% of them have gone bankrupt, of the lottery winners. Now, you say, well, I'd like to give it a shot. I'd like to see what I could do with it. But the point is that we don't want to make the mistake of realizing that life is good simply because it consists in abundance. Second thought is this. He mistook the right use of worldly means, and he chose his own rather than the will of God. Now, what's that mean? That means that he just said, I'm self-sufficient. I don't need any help. I don't need God. I don't need anybody to come along and lift me up. I've got it all together, and so I'm just going to go my way. And that's why Jesus said it's more difficult for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God, but because he was saying that, and he used that analogy of the eye of a camel or whatever it was, and that's a little space to go through a camel. But what he was saying is, the more you have, the less dependent you are. And the more you depend on wealth and the more you depend on possessions, the less likely you are to ask God to do anything for you, to help God. Listen, man, I want everybody in here to be a millionaire or a billionaire, because I want you to have all the wealth and happiness you want, but I don't want you to miss heaven. And so as a result of that, I want you to put your treasure where your heart is. And I want that heart to be God. And the last thing it says, that he was negligent of the future. He thought having his own treasure was really all that he needed, and the result of that, of course, was chaos. You remember the story that Jesus told about the widow's mite? You had all the Pharisees coming, and they put all their money, and they made a big show about putting their money in the coffers of the synagogue. And then this little lady came up, and she had just a mite, and she was almost embarrassed, but she put it in, and Jesus was standing back in the shadows, and he says to his disciples, he said, "You see that?" He said, "That little lady's offering to me has more standing and more value than any of the things that the Pharisees should have given." Why? Because she gave with a heart that was determined to please God. They gave with an attitude, look at me, look at what I have. And in that one passage of Scripture, in that verse in chapter 12, when it talked about being rich toward God, you know what that means? You're rich toward God when you have a relationship with him. You're rich toward God when you have a relationship with him. When you bow your knee at the foot of Christ and you make him Lord of God, you're rich toward God. You're rich toward God when, Matthew 6:33, you seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And then he said, all these things will be added unto you. You're rich toward God when in a moment of surrender and a moment of dedication, you have said to him, oh God, my greatest treasure is the relationship we have together. My greatest desire is that you be pleased with me and that your will becomes my will. Sing with me. He is Lord. is Lord. He is risen from the grave, and he is Lord. Every knee shall bow, every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. God bless you.